been a little bit. It's built to swap, but I don't remember it exactly.
Hello and welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is the Questionable Garage. And this is a 1971 Plymouth Duster we call Try-Hard. It's also been known as Stunt Wall. This is a chassis that we got from our friend Taylor Hull, rotting in the woods at another friend's shop, Jacob, Sally Speed Shop, where he had planned to make it run good enough to jump for his Holes of Hazard series and basically send it off to the scrapper. Well, because sometimes we do very questionable things, I thought it would be really cool to take one car to all three of Holly's events in 1 year. Well, it's not a year, it's a month. I had 3 weeks to run 3 different engines in this thing, and boy, let me tell you, maybe start with a car that wasn't destined for the scrapper before, building it for such an ambitious goal. And let me tell you, we came down to the extreme wire of getting it done in time. If it wasn't for a lot of people coming in at the last minute, we had Nathaniel from Spider Garage. Ken thankfully loaned me his son for a couple days. We had Sean from Sweaty Speed Shop. We had Chris from Chicken City Hot Rods. You maybe recognized him from TV in the past. Jacob showed up. It was just an all-out thrash to get to LS Fest. But we made it. We did fairly well. We did the Mopar, and then we ended up at Ford Fest with an updated 4-link from QA1, and we finished. We did it. We didn't win anything outright, but we did something no one else did, and I don't know that anyone will do in the future. Logically, I'd recommend probably not. It was expensive. But one thing that helped reduce the cost of all of it was our friends at J&J Auto Wrecking let me buy a Hemi from them at a slight discount, and they loaned me an LS3 and a Coyote engine to complete the entire event with. Well, we are many months past September, and it's time for me to get this Coyote out so we can give it back to J&J, and one of you guys might be able to buy it. It's gonna have a lot of really cool swap parts going back with it, because let me tell you, Coyotes are an expensive engine to swap and fit into things. So yes, in the title, when I'm joking about fixing everything wrong with my Coyote Duster, the Mopar people, you can stop being angry with me. The Hemi is going back in it. The Hemi we have for it was originally a 6.1 liter, just standard SRT Hemi, out of a Cherokee that I discovered was a 7-liter stroker. So it's gonna be a whole lot of fun, and it's gonna be a tire destroyer, which I really enjoy. Aside from getting a Mopar engine back in it, we need to fix something I broke. The really nice Tremec TKX that got sent out to me by our friends at American Powertrain, provided by Tremec, I broke it. That has nothing to do with the Tremec, the transmission quality. They make it very clear on their website what it's rated for. And it's not rated for 8,000 RPM clutchless shifts. That's what I did to it on the drag strip with the Coyote to do the best we possibly could. I just slammed as hard as I could to get the best drag times that we could, and it hurt the transmission. So, in today's episode, we are going to be rebuilding a transmission and putting the 7-liter Hemi back into it and kind of just getting this thing ready for what I want to do with it. Mountain road carving, I want to go to some track days with it because nothing makes my heart happier than awful rusty junk being faster than really nice new fancy cars, and that's definitely this thing. Well, all right, we've been talking enough. Let's get in this car and start tearing it down. We got to get the computers unplugged from the inside, and then we can pick it up in the air. We're going to get that transmission on the table, and then maybe we'll finally show you Bruno. If you don't remember Bruno, well, we don't talk about Bruno.
We built this to be very modular, so this is the only ECU. We do have to pull this one because the Coyote takes an extra computer to be able to run, just because it's so extra. So this will actually get to be able to be removed permanently. And since the transmission's got to come out, I'll pop all this up, pull these shifters. That bolt did come loose on me, whoops. Some of it's metric, some of it is SAE. It's like choose your own. 6mm. I choose you. Okay. So it's not 5, it's not 6. It's not 3/16, it's not quarter. Really? Well, why we gotta be that way? All right, well, let's grab some side cutters and different sockets. I'll tell you what, I did not dislike the Coyote. I did not love installing the Coyote. If we're being really honest, it does not install easily. It's fun to drive, and yeah, you see how we ended up. It's not a surprise that some of the stuff got a little loose, if we're being honest. So I like more torque in my cars. I like just big, silly, instant spin tires, Gorilla Man things. The Coyote just didn't quite do that. It has the high RPM stuff, and it does all of that well. With a different gear ratio, it would have been better. And again, it was the smallest displacement of all the engines in the swaps. So you can't hold much against it. Considering on power, it was matching. It was able to keep pace on the horsepower side of things while being the smallest. So that does say a lot for it. Hit to the other side. And we're back. All right, so that's right. I was smart. I put my 4-pin here. God, he just has so many extra wires to sort out. Okay. This and the Hemi have effectively what are called dumb coils. They just take the high energy signals and fire. So in turn, what that means is you have to give them the high energy signal so they know to fire. Whereas LS and a lot of other coils, smart coils, they can take the little line level signals and know what to do with those. I think we're almost ready, maybe? What are you guys doing right now? What are your projects? I mean, we obviously know I got a few too many, but we're working on getting them all caught up. Still very tangly. Still catastrophically tangly, but I think we're about good enough to do the engine side of things. I wish I had shown up in time. If you don't know, that's the factory air cleaner sticker for a 69 Roadrunner. And it was pretty appropriate, I thought, for, you know, our car. Also, when you're at home doing work on things like this, make sure you have your batteries disconnected and all of that, otherwise you're gonna have a bad time. But for us, we already have the kill switch off, so we're good there. You're not unplugging my fan in, guys. It's a little warm. It's not too loud. It makes some noise. It's not too bad. Now, the very first thing I want to tackle is actually the transmission rebuild, but all of this needs to come off anyway. So you go there, you're going to come here. Wideband is going to go over there to get removed. It's been long enough, some little tiny wires. I don't quite remember exactly what they do. Okay, that's these. This is an extra excite wire for the alternator that's unique to this, so I can snip that one wire. We're done. Learning's fun. Relearning what you did months ago, even more fun. But that's the beauty of it, is I tried to be as well thought out, practical, and all the steps I took, so it makes a logical sense. And that comes up to the alternator. And our engine ground will come off. Got to drain all our fluids out too. Undo our electric power steering. Because again, that was just for our Ford, our LS, and our Hemi. Let me get a bucket for coolant, or water. One other thing I'm really looking forward to also trying to get addressed is the steering rack. When we put it together, we're not perfectly centered, so we got the alignment essentially adjusted, but I get like 1 1/4 turns one direction and nearly 2 the other. And that's just basically the nature of a thrash build. We didn't quite get it perfect when we put it together, and for the amount of turning we were doing, it kind of worked. But for future use, I would kind of, you know, like it right. All of your support, watching, let me be able to somehow justify doing it. That's nice. At least it's mostly water. No matter how I put the bucket, it's missing. One other reason why I'm doing this is I need this fitting back for our international harvester. We're getting an engine for that, and we're going to get the back together. Hold that, I think. All right. I think all of the Coyote is unique to the Coyote. There's no repurposed parts on this one. Ooh, that was a little more aggressive than intended. 612s here. And out it comes. Oh yeah. Then we can probably go ahead and pick it up and get the transmission out. What I really want to tear into.
Come on, slave son, cooperate and pull off. Come on, you can do it. Pull off. Pull off. Oh, you didn't. Oh, I just took a fluid bath. Good thing you got no ring kit.
Alright, let's start cracking into this thing. So I've not had one of these apart. I've done a ton of W58s, V160s, R154s, and instead of like a captive spring, they're loose on those. Okay, do not remove. That's going to be an idler bracket. Pretty straightforward. Once it's fully apart, we can maybe look at if it's removable for cleaning. Simple reverse switch. Second shifter position. What's the fun of using a manual, right? Oh, I like that design. That's really clever. So if you need front or back, you just flip-flop. I found our glitter in the fluid. There's that glitter I was looking for. And you see it up here, because what will happen with some cars, especially if you overfill these transmissions, fluid will get in here, and it doesn't have an easy path to get out you can have oil come up and out the top of your shifter. Or when you fill your transmission with glittery bits because you're driving like a fool, it ends up there. So these are all separated now. Got to get all my roll pins back from the bottom. I'm just trying to tear it down, see what we broke. Show you guys what we broke. So Ranger, Benpack, sent out these transmission teardown tables. These have been on a want list of mine for a long time, along with my new tire equipment. So this is a spring detent, just to keep things from flinging around. Take that out. It was kind of funny when I reached out again to like work on getting some of the parts I expected to need to fix this. I was initially met with some apologies that I was running into problems, and I made it clear. I was like, no, this is, transmission was fine. I don't want to say user error, but it was user error. All right, so the center one can stay, but it's all the rest that come off. Oh, there's more glitter. There's my last roll pin. So all our roll pins are located. All right, so now for the front side. The good news is I don't see damage in the back, but this is all 5th gear stuff. Our problems are gonna be up front. We need to pop front bearing off. That comes off. That is our bearing spacer and assembly and everything. There's a bunch of little rolly springs and interlocks. Okay, so these sit in and then are kind of held in with a block. That? Alright, that's different. I have to remember that. Once we finish this teardown, I'm going to scoot this stuff away. Now we got our EDM Festival glitter party going on down here. A little tap tap. Do I need to remove the do not remove? So I kind of figured I wouldn't, right? Alright, well, let's get a big gun. Big gun. I know you just tap on and off. I just want to open the case so I can confirm my parts. Why are you fighting so much? Listen, I'm sorry for shifting you at 8,000 RPM and no clutch. It's not going to happen again. I promise. The engine you're getting to go behind can't do that. It doesn't rev that high. That will never happen again. Is it not like the Toyotas where you get both cases off with everything built up on the intermediate plate? It sure does not feel that way. We're about to remove where it says do not remove. We're going to be adventurous and see what happens. And see how quickly we regret being adventurous. Sounds like fun? No? Well, I agree, but we're going to do it. That might have been one we didn't really want to remove. I see a lot of stuff wiggling around now. Hey, that doesn't look good. I guess don't remove unless you know what you're doing. Good news is I don't. So this goes back in something like that. And that cantilevers with this pin. We'll be getting a diagram before we go back together, that's for sure. Alright, so reverse pin. Will you slide out? Nope. Not until the counter shaft is apart. This is currently forward gear. There we go. This is the gear we're trying to get to. So once I get these shift rods out of the way, I can show you how good and broken I broke it. Which again, if you're gonna do it all the way, right? Don't do it halfway. Bye. Is that enough to let me get reverse out of the way? It is. Alright. There's reverse goodness. That clearly can only go in one way. I'm sure there's a much better way of doing this. This is definitely not a how-to, it's just a how I'm doing. There we go. I've never had one fight like this. Why are you being such an ugly little thing? Trying to make everything about this difficult. Just because you can, I guess. Thank you. There we go. There we go. That was way more difficult than it ever should have been. And of course, fifth looks good because it didn't get abused. Input shaft, there we go. All right, so we are looking at our second gear. And those are our synchronizer engagement teeth, and we're gonna go over it a little bit more with parts on the table, but you see how those tips are almost rounded and pushed up. And if we look here, you can see the same thing. It's completely crashed, folded over, and broken. There you can see it really good on both of them. What should be a nice defined point is rolled over, and that is pretty much smoothed over completely. Compare that to the new part here. You see that nice, crisp, defined edge? And the same thing here on this gear. Nice, crisp, defined edges. Yeah, it's 100% my fault. The transmission did nothing wrong other than get sent to me coyote, red line, no lift shifts. It wasn't designed for it, my fault. So we're gonna get to fix it and put it all back together. Now, the way a synchronizer works on a manual transmission is pretty cool. So things in here are all turning different parts, and you have single, double, triple, all kinds of fancy synchronizers. But we're gonna go with what we've got here, where you have a braking cone, the actual soft metal in synchronizer brake in the middle, and then your engagement teeth that will actually lock your selector into the teeth. The synchronizer is only meant to basically get the gear up to speed so your selector can physically lock in that mechanical connection. So when you shift and have that click, it's actually all of these teeth walking into these teeth, and it's this part's job to get them to the same speed to make a nice smooth engagement. Now, some gears will have a cone built in here. This basically engages a surface on the face of the gear. Then you have your brake piece that will not come out for me one-handed, but it is a soft metal with a friction material, and its job is, as this starts to get pushed by the selector, engages that cone and starts to speed up that gear, or sometimes slow it down, again, depending on what it is, how you're shifting. And then these will all key in together, be able to turn different speeds, and that stays pretty close. This has a little bit of free play in it, so as they get close together and that gear is turning up to speed, it helps line up those teeth for the engagement. So that's a relatively simplified explanation. Here with it turning with everything kind of lubed, you can see that gold piece in there, that's your brake cone, brake ring, and it's able to turn. And as this starts to slide back, is this? Okay, here, let's do it with this one. So you got first gear turning away here, and as this starts to go, my goodness, as this starts to go, yeah, there we go. And it wasn't even on screen.
So, as it starts to slide, you see that free play. Now there's a little bit extra because everything's loose, but it lines things up. And once this is locked in, that gear is now locked in. So you have power that comes in your input shaft, which is always turning your counter shaft. And once this gear is locked, because you'll notice these gears can turn freely, so they won't transmit power, this one will. So that input shaft is turning, counter shaft is turning, that is engaged. Once we're locked in, power goes out the back. Now that we're back in neutral, everything turns free. And the way fourth gear works is 1-to-1. Input shaft comes in, this will slide forward and lock to your input shaft, and it turns straight through. So that is your 1-to-1 gear. Your counter shaft will be down there doing counter shaft things, but it doesn't do any torque multiplication when you're locked into your input shaft. I'm gonna pull up the repair manual because I'm not sure. Some output shafts pull apart differently and I don't want to break anything more. Also there's more of our glitter. Yep, that's my fault. Tremec is amazing in the sense that they just have all the repair manuals and specs and steps and processes on their website. And it would have made our teardown a lot easier and less work for me going back together if I looked at that manual first. We don't do that. For whatever reason, we are just like driven to not look at repair manuals. I don't know why, but at any rate, we now have our main shaft completely apart, our broken bits next to each other. Now I will point out the repair manual said everything should come off this way, which did not make sense to me because that looked like a fixed part of the shaft. Now that it's completely apart, it still looks like a fixed part of the shaft. And when you look at the repair manual pictures, they show this gear as being a fixed part of this shaft, which it isn't. I don't know if a TKO is built that way or if early TKXs were slightly different, but it was one of those times where sometimes experience is important. You know, you'll learn working on stuff. Don't be afraid to try, but it was one of those things that in the press, it was way too much pressure. Something felt very off. So I started taking it apart from the other side. That's when tools exploded and filleted a finger open and left me a lot of really big nasty splinters. Just sparing you the gory bits. It was the tool truck tool that actually was the one that filleted my finger, and the Harbor Freight one was the one that finished getting it apart. It's pretty gory under there. But it all came apart this way, and the way I had to do it is you had to pull this gear off. There's some of these lock retainers that drop in, so you have to do it in segments. You can't just go the entire way, because the selector hub had completely captive lock retainers. So you're gonna need some bearing pullers, you're gonna need a press, you're gonna need some long extensions. You can get it all apart, not a big deal. But now that we've got everything apart, we can really show you how bad I broke it. So that is our second gear, and you can see all of those selector teeth, just how they're kind of rounded. And then here we go to a good one, right there. There we go. You see how crisp and pointy that all is. That kind of is important for how it all works. And then again, the selector hub, you see how that is just all, well, it's rounded compared to that very crisp point right there. You see how sharp that is and how sharp that isn't. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything cleaned up, and we're gonna start putting it all back together. And then we've got one more really important thing we need to do to the car to fix all of its issues, and that's pull the Coyote out. Sorry, Ford guys, I know you really like them. It's a good engine. It does well, but it's not a 7-liter stroker Hemi. Doesn't sound as cool as a 7-liter stroker Hemi. The Hemi's gonna be a lot more fun. Now we got a 4-link back there. Also, we got them Nittos finally actually putting the power down. The flares looking good. Tell me, what do you think of the flares? I love that style wheel. I am a sucker for 5 spokes.
I know not everyone likes this style on an old muscle car. I like it a lot. All right, it's time to put our transmission back together, hopefully. We got our shafts all together. I've got the case mounted up. A lot of people, when they're doing these transmissions, will use like a bucket method where you drill a hole in a 5-gallon bucket and the lid, but I just threw away all of my buckets that had lids. So if you happen to have a transmission teardown table and you're gonna do a lot of the Tremex, you can actually drill a pilot hole in the floor of your or the base of your table so it can sit down, or do what I did, set it right on the edge, clamp it secure, so you're able to build the stack out. Because I actually, you know, having not done this transmission, I really like how it comes together and goes apart, the bolt-in intermediate, everything like that. So we're going to be referencing a repair manual a fair bit as we go along, do our best. I do need to be careful because, like we discovered, apparently a couple of the steps were a little bit off, but that's okay. Sorry I had to turn you guys off. It was getting frustrating and I needed to focus, and you know, it happens. And let me tell you, if you're ever working on something and it's fighting you, you're doing what the book says, you're doing what you think should work and nothing's working, walk away for a minute, take a breather, because if you keep forcing it, most likely you're gonna end up breaking something and make it even more frustrating. So getting the whole thing to go in, I put it as one entire unit. They're kind of showing you putting the front cover and input shaft later. I wanted to drop it in as a whole assembly. Shift forks fought a little bit. They're all where they belong. We've got our pivot now in there. Getting the shaft in, they show it dropping in as all units. And I found putting in one gear at a time for the reverse counter, that's how we got it all to work. So we are now all assembled on this half. We are ready to put our intermediate on. We got our gaskets there. We're gonna go ahead and get in place, put the intermediate on, and get something, again, I've not come across it. The little locating bolts there to where you basically build this half of the transmission, bolt it together, put the tail shaft housing on. I really like that. are inside and it's running. Working on getting the coolant burp. Sorry we're on the wide angle lens, but we kind of need it to go over what we're trying to do. We got the wiring cleaned up just a little bit there. One of the other big things we needed to address with Try-Hard is when you turned left. When you turn to the left, you would get a binding, popping, grinding in the front end, and I'm gonna kind of show you potentially why. So right now, wheels are roughly straight ahead. We got one tape mark. We're gonna turn left, one turn. We're gonna turn left again. And you see we are like 1.8 turns, almost a full 2 turns. So let's get back centered, roughly. And now we're gonna go to the right. And we got 1 and an eighth maybe. So when we were thrashing this car together, quite frankly, we had a lot to do. And we got the steering rack slightly off center when we put everything together and set our tie rod lengths and all of that. So what we need to do, get the rack as centered as possible. We're gonna have to pull the tie rods down and then kind of reset toe, so that way we can go 1.5 turns left and 1.5 turns right, because this Mustang rack is about a 3-turn rack. Basically what that means, a turn is when we're all the way to the left, the input of the rack and pinion needs to turn 3 times to reach all the way to the right. So we're gonna balance everything we can from up top. We'll pick it up, pull those tie rods, and get everything set while we finish working on burping this cooling system out. The Hemi still has the stock thermostat in it, so it tends to run a little bit warm, but everything else... Here, wait, can I get my foot there? As you can tell by how much we're saking, that 7-liter is good. It's violent. I am really looking forward to driving this car with the Hemi, with the really good rear suspension. So we're gonna play with this a little bit, get it centered where we're really happy, and then I'll pick you guys back up when we're underneath the car, and we'll talk a little bit more about the tie rods and what they do and how we can do some measurement to get it a little bit more accurate. Our tie rod assemblies here are basically not on symmetrical. Our inner tie rods are protruding the same lengths, and we can measure, and we'll have slightly different thread exposed on each side. Also, one quick telltale, you can see our heim joint has a little bit of thread here. And then if we come over to this side, this heim joint is choked all the way in. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the long bolts with the bump steer correction from our tie rod ends, get everything balanced out a whole lot closer, you know, so our wheels can point straight, and we'll reset and do an alignment from there. I might actually finally take this thing and put it on a computerized alignment rack, but for finishing this episode, I'll tape measure it with the board and we'll get it going down the road, because we now have that 7-liter Hemi back in there. We now have a second gear that is not completely destroyed by my own fault. We've got a good second gear in there, so I'm looking forward to driving this thing. It just, I didn't get to do a lot with the Hemi, but it felt right. 7 liters in a rust bucket, all the torque in the world. That's right. Everyone needs a 71 Duster with a 7-liter Gen 3 Hemi. World would be a much happier place. All right, so one thing I want to try tackling real quick, since this wheel is currently towed out a little bit more from where it should, I want to go ahead and loosen our jam nuts and just try turning this in to get it relatively straight and see where we end up on both our outer tie rod, our heim joint, and the inner tie rod. See where that positioning is. Then we can take that side apart and try to push that wheel out a little bit if we need to, but just trying to zero and work out where things are at. You know, when you're first putting things together, you take time and measure it out, and you have a little bit easier go of it, but listen, we were under a little bit of a time crunch, if we're being, you know, honest. I don't think you guys are that amazed to hear that in the extreme time crunch, maybe one or two things ended up just a smidge off, you know? Well, I see one thing that's happening is our inner tie rod is not letting me choke on as much as I would have liked. So, maintain some adjustment out here. Actually, if I get both with a slight bit of toe in, it's pretty good as well, because it lets me get a little more thread on the outer heim joint, but at the same time you don't want too much thread on your outer heim joint, because the more thread you can have sucked in, the stronger the joint is. Very awkward to measure. About 1.4 with a thread or two on the inside. What doesn't make sense, why is our tie rod length so different? To the outer, to the outer. Okay, no, our so our bellows are about the same left to right. Not 100% accurate on all racks, but given that we know we're centered, given we're measuring pretty much the same, everything else in our suspension's right, we just need to lengthen that quite a bit, because we are towed in a lot. Now, anytime you have a car in the air and you set it down, before you just immediately start adjusting your toe, putting your 2x4s on and doing your measurement, you need to roll the car front to back some, get the suspension to kind of level out. There's always a little bit of tension in the bushings and everything as it comes down. So you do need to kind of rock the car, roll it just a little bit, we'll roll it back forward. Make sure the steering wheel is roughly what you counted out as centered. And then you get to lay on the ground with some tape measures and do some toe in and toe out. So I should have already had my boards and tape measures ready. That would have been smart. All right, so we have our toe plate. I had toe plates and then they got run over. So I've got some angle iron. Something you want to make sure is whatever you're using to go against your rim surface or your tire surface, it's the same left and right. If it's a different height, it's going to skew your numbers a little bit. But we've got two tape measures, front and back. Make sure they read the exact same. There shouldn't be, but there are sometimes some, manufacturing differences in a tape measure, and an inch isn't always an inch. And since we're working with 16ths and a 32nds of an inch, you'd want to make sure they're the same. So we've got a butted tire front and back, and we're doing the same on this side. You slide into the tire, make sure you're taut, and we're looking like 72 3/8 roughly. And in the back, we're looking like 72 1/4. So that means we are currently towed out because the front has more than the rear. Now, if we were drifting, I would actually want that. I would want the wheels towed out slightly, pointed outwards. Seems counterintuitive. It technically makes the car unstable, and in that, the wheels kind of just track around. But when you're drifting, the reason you want that is if you had your slight toe in like you normally would on a track or street alignment for stability, when you go to turn that wheel, your right wheel that does your steering and drift when you're sliding to the right, it now has to come from negative toe before positive toe and before it starts steering the car. So on a drift car, a lot of times people will run, I've heard as much of a 1/4 inch of toe out. Again, I would probably set this right at an 1/8 inch of toe out. We're actually gonna look for about an 1/8 of toe in, or between an 1/8 and 3/16. So I'm probably gonna be closer to an 1/8 of toe in. Since predominantly street driving, the slight toe in is gonna make the car wanna steer center and it tracks a little bit better. So just a matter of, we'll turn each of our tie rods slightly since we know the steering wheel's close to where we want,
and you'll see it there. It's gonna be hard for me to like on my back, turn, and do all those things real quick. So let's get this done so we can go for a drive.
Disengaging good, and we're physically moving. You never quite know when it's all apart and back together. I will say it does feel like turning is a little more even. Let's see how second gear goes.
All right, and there we have it. We are back in the shop. We had a successful test drive. We're able to shift into second gear without it sounding like us just banging a bunch of metal parts together. It works phenomenal, and the Coyote's faster. The ultimate top speed and high RPM acceleration. The Coyote's faster, but I'll tell you what, our 7-liter Hemi, it makes me happy. When I drive a car, I like massive RPM and torque delivery bands, just when it works the entire time. And that's what the Hemi gives us. From low RPM all the way out to its red line, it's pulling hard. Coyote needed to be wound up to pull really hard, but it's right. The Mopar has a Mopar. Everything's good with the world. And bonus, if you guys are looking to do a Coyote swap and you want one with a whole lot of really nice swap parts on it, including Holley wiring harnesses and oil pans, and you're gonna have the Ford Racing swap manifolds on it, hit up the guys J&J. I am gonna get this sent back to them. It's a long time coming. It was supposed to be, you know, like December, and it's June. A little late, but hey, it's coming back, and we've got good parts on it. Now, if you've somehow made it to this point of the video, you've seen us do all the work on the car, and you don't quite understand the significance of this, you really should go back and watch the whole series. This was a Duster destined for the scrap pile. It was gonna be jumped, work as a stunt car for someone else's YouTube channel. They gave it to me in support of a very questionable idea, taking a car, one car, with 3 different engines in 3 weeks to all of one company's events. Holley, thank you for your part support, but we showed up to the LS Fest, Poe Party, and Ford Fest with the appropriate engines, no cheating, and we did pretty stinking well, I feel like, given the car that we built for all of those events. And now it's back Mopar powered. It's not gonna have anything else swapping into it. It's gonna stay Gen 3 Hemi, but I need to take it to more events. Some of you guys on our Instagram and Twitter were suggesting sick week or drag racing events. Honestly, that is not what this car is built for. All of the QA1 suspension throughout it, the Nitto tires on those new Rocket Racing wheels, it's meant to handle. I'm gonna take it on some just fun, more mountain runs. I couldn't stop smiling driving the car through the small twisties. I'm gonna take it to the really good twisties. That's what it's meant for. So we're gonna try to find maybe some more autocross events because I'm terrible at it, and the way you get better is doing it more often. Or just we'll go with some road racing events. I don't know, I wanna get it out. I want you guys to see it. I'm not gonna call this one done like I did Roadblock. You know, turn signals. You know, that's what we've got for turn signals right now. Eventually I'll get those wired up and working. Maybe a fuel gauge, you know, or I'll just carry some spare gas. Who knows what we're gonna do next, but right now it's driving amazing. I'm really happy with it, and I'm gonna tell you guys, if you're having a bad day, jump in your car. If you've got a radio, put on your favorite music. If you don't have a radio, enjoy the exhaust note and just go for a drive. Be responsible, don't do anything absolutely dangerous on the streets, but just take a couple minutes, reset, enjoy your car. And if your car is not running, I know it hurts not being able to drive it, but just take a couple minutes and put a bolt in. Do one small thing. Find just a little bit of time for yourself, reconnect with your machine, and just kind of recenter yourself, because it's tough out there at times, but there's always another sunrise, and you deserve to see it, and I hope you're going to. As we wrap up this episode of fixing what I broke catastrophically in the transmission, doing exactly what Tremec said not to do, parts manufacturers sometimes know better than idiots in a workshop. I'm Jared, reminding you guys to always make questionable choices, but not when it comes to your mental health. Do what you need to, call a friend, post in the comment section. We're here for you guys. Love all of you. Appreciate that you let me do this. We'll see you next time.